So I'm just going to have you write down the steps for today, and then I'm going to show you a lot of animal examples today that students have done in the past so you can get a sense of what I mean by major body parts and how to put those major body parts on in a way that makes sense. But first, on that next clean page, let's write down your steps for today. So I know it's a lot, but there's a lot to know today. So I'm going to talk you through the steps, write them down in your notebook, please, and then I'll actually demonstrate the steps. So always, the first thing you do when you unwrap your project each day is assess what stage is your clay in. Is it plastic? If so, it's going to be pretty easy to work with and maybe even a little bit too wet. And so then you might need to let it sit out for 5 minutes or so to firm up. It might be leather hard, in which case it's perfect. So it has strength, but it's still malleable. You can still do stuff to it. Or it might be bone dry if you didn't wrap it up very well. And then you have to start over again. So we always hope it's either in the plastic or the leather hard stage, or ideally it would be leather hard that we want. So then after you've checked what stage your clay is in, I want you to double check, make sure that head is slipped, scored, and melded well, because that was your assignment from yesterday. Next, you get to choose which features of your animal are major features. And I would assume legs or flippers or wings would be a major feature. Tail would be a major feature. If you're doing a turtle, the shell would be a major feature. If you're doing an elephant, the trunk and the big ears would be major. What I would not have you do today are little features like claws or textures or eyes. And even like if smaller ears, I would save all that for tomorrow because I'm going to focus on facial features and tiny details tomorrow. So today you're doing major features. If you have important features that don't pop out very much, like a turtle shell, you're going to be using coils so that you don't have to sculpt an entire turtle shell and put that on top of your creature. That would be very risky, that air would be trapped in between. So I'm going to show you a trick to making a turtle shell or wrinkles or other sorts of things that might be important features, but not huge, major, like popping out features. Hips and shoulders, I'm going to show you how to do those today by simply pressing in the clay. You don't need to add extra clay to make a shoulder. You just press the clay around the shoulder to a lower level. So it looks like the shoulder pops out in reality more than it actually is. Then all those major features that you've sculpted, like wings and tails, etc., you don't make them, or sorry, you don't attach them immediately because they might be really soft and flimsy immediately. So if you kind of make all those features, and then by the time you're done making all those features, you come back to the first one, and it should be closer to leather hard. It should have dried out maybe just a little bit. Letting it sit out for about 5 minutes will help. And then you can start scoring and slipping and melding those features onto the body so that they're really truly strong and attached. And my recommendation would be to have the weight of your creature resting on its belly. So I wouldn't try to make your animal standing on its legs unless you've made the legs really stumpy and thick. Otherwise, just let the belly be what's resting on the table, and the arms and legs can be on the sides, maybe curled around like under the head of your creature, maybe touching one leg touching the other leg for strength. But I wouldn't necessarily have the legs under the creature unless you're going to make those legs, again, really strong and really thick and stubby. When you have all the body parts for today that you want to add attached, then take a photo of your progress for today. That's what you'll submit by 10 p.m. And then use the same damp paper towel that you used yesterday to wrap around your animal. Reuse that same paper towel. You might need to re-wet the paper towel and then wrap that around your animal again to lock it in that leather hard state and so it doesn't dry out. If you feel like your clay is really plastic today, like maybe a little too wet and it's still kind of sticky and really, really soft, then don't do the paper towel thing. Then just let it be bagged, like just straight up sealed up bag till tomorrow, and then check it. And if it's leather hard tomorrow, that's when you can do the wet paper towel. We don't want to overhydrate the clay because then it could actually dissolve right there in your bag and you open up the next day and you have to start over. So if it's really, really wet, don't do the paper towel. Okay, so these are the steps I want you to have in your notes today. If you are not done writing, I'll give you a little smidge more time. Otherwise, take a screenshot or a photo so you can finish writing later. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to move on to some photos in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to show you lots and lots of pictures to give you some more inspiration about what features you might be adding today. So these are all made by students this year in distance learning. So these are 2 cats. You can see that the cat on the left has a dynamic composition where the body is kind of curled and facing one direction more than the other. And then the cat on the right has more of a static composition. The head and the legs are more in a straight linear composition. And you notice the legs in both cases are major features. The tail is a major feature. And you'll eventually have to slip and score something on the back of your animal that will be a handle for a lid. You can see both of these pots have lids that have been cut off. You're not cutting the lid today, and you don't have to add the handle today. You could, but I'm going to talk more about the handle probably in the coming days. So you don't have to do that part today unless you want. One other feature I wanted to point out about the cat. Look at the cat on the left. The cat on the left has a snout that sticks out. So that was extra clay that was added on to the head to make the nose and the cheeks and the mouth more three-dimensional. The cat on the right just has a nose that pops out. It doesn't have a snout. And there's not one way that's better than the other. But I did want to point that out because maybe that snout would be a major feature that you add today if you want that area to be more three-dimensional. Okay, this kid did a turtle on the left and then alligator on the right, or crocodile, one or the other. So major features here would be the legs, obviously, the tail of the crocodile. Those little spines, that's a tiny detail that should be saved for later. The shell of the turtle, though, that might be a feature that you do today, and I'll be showing you a way to do that. And the legs of the turtle and the legs of the crocodile too have been made off to the side of the body. And that's really smart because then the little legs don't have to support any weight. So that's a good solution. All right, here we have 2 bears that are done in kind of slightly different ways, although the pose of the bear is very similar. It's kind of a dynamic composition, kind of curved to one side. The 2 front legs are in front of the bear's head, kind of acting like a pillow. The rear leg is attached to the belly of the bear, and the other leg that you can't see on the other side, I literally don't think they even put the other leg on there. In some cases, you can just kind of pretend that the animal is laying on its legs, and the legs don't even really need to show very much. And I'll talk more about that when I do the demo. So just 2 different ways of doing the bear. One has a shorter snout, one has a longer snout. Just things to be aware of. All right, the kid on the left did a ram with a mushroom on its back, and major features there, of course, would have been the legs, the snout, maybe the horns would have been done on a day like today. And then on the right, we have a dog. This kid did a sculpture of his own dog, which was really sweet. And of course, the snout would have been a major feature. The legs, the tail would have been major features. And the ears could be attached on a day like today, or you could save the ears for tomorrow. Because I'm going to have a trick for making realistic ears that I will share with you tomorrow. So you might want to wait on your ears. So I usually discourage kids from doing licensed characters, but this kid did a Bulbasaur. And that was really cute, and it's fine if you want to do a licensed character, I guess. Normally, you would have to get permission from the person that created Bulbasaur, but she really, really wanted to do that. So, so she created the legs, the bulb, and the bulb, because it's obviously would be really thick, she made the bulb as 2 additional pinch pots that were put together. So the bulb itself is also hollow. So if you have, for example, let's say you want to do a fox would have a big bushy tail. So you would need to make that big bushy tail to be hollow. So that could be 2 more pinch pots that you could make, because remember, you can grab additional clay from your bag, 2 additional pinch pots that could be slipped and scored together and then sculpted into that long tube-like shape, and that could become the tail of a creature that has a big bushy tail. The frog is another good example of, look at the legs. I'm going to point out the legs on the frog. We would always assume that the legs would be like long and skinny and come away from the body. But this person solved the problem of really fragile legs, because legs that stick out from the body will be incredibly fragile. They made the legs tucked up against the body. So the frog's body is very compact, very streamlined, very strong. So that's a thing to consider. No matter what animal you're making, the legs should probably be tucked up either under the body or next to the body, so that everything is very strong and compact and less likely to break. This kid did a dragon, and she tucked the tail of the dragon up under the head of the creature, and she did not even make any legs because she didn't need to. We have the assumption that the legs are being hidden by the body and hidden by the tail. So if your animal has a really big bushy tail, like the fox example that I gave earlier, if the fox's tail or the dragon's tail or whatever your animal's tail wraps around the body, maybe you don't even have to make legs. We can assume that the legs are hidden under the body. So that's a solution. That's kind of a legal cheat, if you will. And then her other major features for the dragon were the wing and probably the ears and the snout. And then the little cow on the right, there's very little additional features added to that cow. A little bit for the snout. The feet are just stumpy little feet, really cute little feet. And then the ears, and then the hat, and then that cute little frog that she put on the back too, of course. But for today, her steps, the cow steps, she probably could have just added the stumpy feet and the snout, and that would have been it for today for her major features. So in a case like that cow, it has really been like made kind of cartoony, or we would, in the art world, we would call that abstract. It's been simplified, and so you're only including the most major features. And that's okay. If you want to abstract your animal and simplify it, make it more cartoony, that's totally fine. I'm A-okay with that. In fact, sometimes it's more creative to pick and choose as an artist which parts of the animal you want to include. So I'm going to move into the demo now. And actually, I'm going to grab an example from right behind me, so I'll be right back. So the animal that I'm making for you guys chose a chameleon, so that's what I'm going to be working on. But this is an animal that I made 2 trimesters ago. It's a honey badger. So my honey badger is sleeping, but he or she has caught a snake, and the snake is sleeping too in the honey badger's mouth. And so this mammal is maybe a little bit more like some of the creatures you are going to be making. The chameleon that I'm going to be making is going to be a little bit different than a lot of mammals that you might be making. So I might refer to this when I'm talking about something that doesn't apply to my chameleon. Okay, so I'm going to shift my direction here. So I have my chameleon, and I've been kind of trying to assess what stage he's in. And if I push really hard on his body, I can make a mark in the body. So then that's a good sign that, that it's leather hard. So I really need to keep it in this stage. So I'm gonna definitely wrap this up with a wet paper towel when I'm done. So now I'm just checking and making sure that head is melded on well. Eventually you're gonna be smoothing this with a sponge, and you can smooth it today, but it's not 100% necessary. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth yet. So when I think about my chameleon, my major features that I want to make today are legs, a tail, and maybe that's it. Like, chameleons don't have ears, so the legs and the tail are kind of what I'm going to be making today. So I'm going to grab some additional clay. I'm going to wedge it. And then just by hand, just by sculpting, I'm going to start to make those features of my chameleon. Now, I'm going to sculpt, I don't want to make these too long, but I'm going to sculpt one leg, and this is probably going to be too big. So I'm going to maybe come back to it later and cut it down a little bit. Yeah, that's a really long leg for a chameleon. but I'm just sculpting it now so it can kind of firm up a little bit. So there's one leg. With my other leg, I'm going to make my chameleon curved in a dynamic composition. So for my second leg, I might just need the shoulder part here, and then I might make the leg kind of curl under the head. So I might not even really need to finish that other leg that's coming from the back side. Same thing with this hip here. So I might just make the hip and then kind of create the assumption that this leg is going under the body. So I might not need to make this rear leg. But with this other front leg, I will need to make it. So I'm going to create that final leg. So this is a 3-legged chameleon. We just assume that the 4th leg is there. So I'm going to make those legs. I'm just going to let those chill for a little bit. And I'm going to make the chameleon's feet too. So I'm going to make those as separate pieces. So I'm sculpting a little nugget of clay here. And then I'm going to use my popsicle stick to separate the toes of my chameleon. So if your animal has claws, this is a good way to create claws. You just create one chunk of clay and then kind of separate it into multiple segments. Okay, so there's one chameleon foot, and then I'll do another chameleon foot. These all seem kind of big in relation to my animal's body. So that's an issue of proportion. If you decide that, oh my gosh, those legs are too big, that wing is too small, if things look odd to you because of the size, that means that the proportion is off. So that's something you need to kind of hold up and take a look at things next to your creature to make sure that the size is the way you want it to be. All right, so I'm making things that are relevant to my creature. I will show you, I promise, things that might be more relevant to your creatures, like turtle shells and snouts and all that. I'm just kind of making some of my features here quick first. So I'm gonna start scoring and slipping some of these features on. Oh, here's my fork and my slip. So I'm gonna start with the front 2 legs of my creature. So I think this was my front leg. So I'm going to score and slip and kind of blend that part of my leg into the clay. Okay, so there's leg number 1, and then I'll add the foot to it. So I'm going to cut off a part of that leg because it was kind of long. And then I'm going to score and slip this weird 4-toed foot onto my leg. Can you guys see that? Yeah, I guess you can see that. Feel free to ask any questions too as I'm working. Okay, so now I'm going to make his head resting on that foot. So that means I also need to score and slip the head onto the foot. But I'm not going to meld that because I don't want it to blend in. I want the foot to look separate from the head. So there's one leg. And right now he wants to tip that way because there's nothing supporting him on the back side. So I'm going to do that back leg too now. I'm going to do slip and score where it would come up as a shoulder. Okay, and then I'm just going to put this second leg kind of under the head as though it's curled under. And then I might not even need to put a foot on there because it's totally hidden. So I'm going to meld in this shoulder after I scored and slipped so it looks like it joins into my body. And then I'm going to carefully pick it up. And so this is that other leg. It just kind of disappears under the body. So I'm totally not going to put a foot on that. There's no need for it. But I do need to join it. Okay, so that there's not going to be any air trapped. Okay, so there's leg number 2. All right, it just looks like it's going under his body, and we just assume that there's a foot underneath there, even though there's really not. Okay, so things are coming together. Now I'm going to do my back leg. And so I have this I wonder, let's see, how would it look? Ooh, yeah, I kind of like that leg coming forward and then coming back. So I'm going to do something like that. So I'm going to have this slipped and scored, slipped and scored. Melt that in. Oh, I forgot to make the tail. Oh, I'll do that in a little bit. I'm going to bend this knee a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to slip and score where that attaches to the shoulder. And then he needs his back foot joined on. So I'm going to join that back foot. And then this back foot is going to be attached to the body. Does that look weird? Is that how a chameleon's body works? I honestly have no idea. I'm going to have to consult some pictures. See, that's the difficulty. I don't have my pictures handy right now. Ideally, I would want you to have your pictures handy, either the pictures you drew or even better, an actual picture that you find on the internet of your creature. So I'm just using the popsicle stick to do some melding because I couldn't get my fingers inside there. Okay, so there's that looks weird. Okay, I'm gonna have to decide if I like that or not. So then I got to score and slip under here, and I'm just gonna press that foot up against the body. So it's connected in another point. Remember, the more points of contact you have, the stronger your animal is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to make the tail quick and get the tail on there because I feel like once the tail is on, maybe that will make it look more like a chameleon. Right now, it's rather frog-like. So normally I think a chameleon's tail would curl down, but because it's sitting on the table, I don't have the luxury of having room to make the tail curl down. So I'm just rolling a coil that's got more of a point on one side, and then I'm just going to spread some slip on that coil, and then I'm going to roll it up. So the slip is kind of taking the place of me scoring and slipping this tail. And so I'm going to cut the end so it's more flat. And then, ooh, that really helps. Oh my gosh. Sometimes you'll be working on your animal and you're going to say to yourself, whoa, this is a hot mess. This doesn't look like anything like I want it to. And then you'll get that one feature on there and you'll be like, oh, there it is. There's what it's supposed to look like. So that tail really helped. So now I'm going to score and slip the tail up so it touches the body. But this tail is in the plastic stage and it's going to want to keep falling. So what you may have to do is make a little temporary support of clay and then get something as a barrier. Like I've just ripped a piece of Kleenex here as a barrier between that temporary support and the clay so it doesn't stick. And then just put that little support up against the thing that you want to stay put so it doesn't fall, sag and fall off. I had to do that with my, whatever this is, honey badger, because the tail wouldn't stay up by itself. So I had to create a temporary support until this became leather hard enough to support itself. Okay, so I'm going to let Chameleon chill over here for a little bit and firm up a little bit. And then I'm going to show you some other tricks on these sears that I just made quickly before class. So let's say you're doing a turtle and you want to do a shell. So the impulse would be to sculpt a little shell and slip and score it on top of there, but that's super risky. Anytime you put a big piece of clay over a big piece of clay, you're risking air being trapped in between. So here's a better way. If you have an area that pops out and you want to make it pop out without adding a lot of extra weight, you can roll yourself a coil. And then I'm going to score and slip where the edge of my shell will be. And if I wrap that coil around where the edge of my shell will be, now all I have to do is meld just this one direction. By melding this direction, I'm creating the illusion that this whole coil that I added is the ridge of a shell. Okay, so now it looks like a turtle shell. And if I did a second coil down here, that would be like its bottom shell. And then you could make its little head poke out and the little feet poke out. So that's a way to add the illusion of layers without actually adding a lot of clay. Now, another thing that you can do, especially if you're doing a mammal, is to add the shoulders and the hips. Instead of sculpting and adding clay, which, you know, adds some weight, you can take your popsicle stick and press in the clay that would come from or that would be around the area of the shoulder, so that this could be a shoulder. And then I would push in the area that would be around the hip. So it's the belly that I'm pushing in here. And then the areas that I leave pushed out, this could become the shoulder, this could become the hip. So that's a way of adding some dimension. Now those are kind of rough, I would smooth those up a little bit, but that's a way of adding dimension by simply pushing in the clay you already have. I didn't have to add any clay, any width, any heaviness at all. I just left the clay at the original level here and pushed in the clay here. And the popsicle stick just gives you a little bit more precision as you're doing that pushing in. So then the head of the animal would be here. What else would be helpful? Oh, I'll show you the head, how to do a snout. There is, oh, okay. So here's a smaller piece of clay that could be the head of my creature. So yesterday I showed you that a good way to kind of map out the skull of your animal is to figure out, okay, which side is the nose, like where would the nose be? And then on either side of where the nose would be, take your thumbs and start to push in and then kind of drag out where the eye sockets would be. And that gives you automatically a bridge to your nose. And it gives you a natural place to put a snout or a beak or a mouth of some kind. So that kind of becomes a good starting point for virtually any animal. I should have done this really more with me looking straight at it so it would be more symmetrical. There, that's a little bit better. And so now I could add a snout by taking a little tiny piece of clay. And, different animals have different sizes of snout. But if this is an animal with a smaller snout, like a raccoon or a fox or a bear, I could sculpt kind of like a little gumdrop shape. And then score and slip, put that little snout right on there, and then meld it in. So I'm melding it up the bridge of the nose, melding it into where the eye sockets are, melding it into the bottom part, so that the animal starts to have a more natural mouth area. So I'm going to bring more of that clay downward because it looked a little bit like a beak. And then I want to round it more into the chin area. Okay. And then tomorrow I'll show you ways to make the nose more pronounced and the lips and the eyes and ears and all that. Okay. So that's a good snout technique. Trying to think what else might be helpful. I'm trying to think what other kids have done before. Do you have anything that you want to see me do? Like it's an animal that you're making and you're not quite sure how to make the feature for that animal? If you're making a wing, what you may want to do is kind of flatten out your clay. And then cut out that wing shape. I'm just doing this super roughly, mind you. And then once you cut out that shape, like an elephant ear or a wing or anything that's kind of supposed to be sort of thin, cut it out, but then pinch the edges because it's going to be more lifelike if the edges are more rounded. So I just made this wing and the edges were really thick and kind of angular and slabby. So I'm just kind of pinching the edges now to make that wing more lifelike. So then I can add a wing like raised, like it's flying. I can slip and score it against the body, like the wing is against the body. Although again, this is a little bit risky. This is a big area of clay touching a big area of clay. So you would need to slip and score that really well. And then you could decide if you wanted to meld it, but you might not want to. You might want the wing to be very separate from the body. So scoring and slipping would be enough in some cases. All right, so I'm going to go back to my chameleon now. This reminds me, isn't like in the movie Tangled, isn't the companion of the princess a little chameleon? That's what this reminds me of. So he's looking okay. Oh, that's his support. So I'm going to take my paper towel. And if this is as far as I'm going for today, I'm just going to get some water on my paper towel so it's damp again. And I'm going to lay that over my animal. Ooh, first I would take a picture. And then I'm going to lay that over my animal and I'm going to bag it up tight so it stays leather hard. We need to keep it leather hard pretty much till the end of the week. So that in and of itself is so that's a whole bunch of steps, and I know it doesn't apply to everybody. Like, you're going to have an animal that maybe those steps don't apply to. And if you're stuck, if you don't know what to do, if you're struggling with how to make an ear for a wombat, message me and I will do the best I can to help you with your wombat ear.